God, Spinoza's God, if you're out there, please make sure the next book isn't this bad. Please! Good morning, everybody. Jimmy22 here to talk to you today about a book called 90 Minutes in Heaven by Don Piper with Cecil Murphey. And yeah, so this book is based on the true story. Well, most of it's true. One big part is allegedly true. I'll get into that in a moment. But for now, just know that this is based on the true story of a man named Don Piper, and he wrote what happened to him on this book. So let's get right into it. So things start off well enough with, same way every single story you'll almost every read in your entire life, with things going on. Okay, it's an everyday. Everybody has their everyday life, and Don Piper is on the road. He's on the road and he gets into a car accident. It's a bad car accident. It involves a truck, which was far heavier than what he was driving, and by all accounts, he shouldn't have survived. His body was thrown. He lost bones. Like, I don't mean they were broken. I mean, he lost bones. Bones were hit out of his body and they were sent flying. Basically, the only thing that was left, the only limb that it was certain he was going to keep was his right arm. And yeah, so it was a lot to take in, and he did not, according to 90 Minutes in Heaven, he did not take it all in. He, in fact, let it come in and just left his body, if you believe what happened, what it says in this book. And he died and he went to heaven, and he was into heaven for a very, very, very brief amount of time. Exactly 90 minutes, give or take, before he was brought back via the power of prayer. And again, this is a true story. So, okay, the first part is he dies and goes to heaven. Second part, and honestly the most interesting part of the book, is his recovery. He comes back and he sees, he finds out just how badly he was hurt. His doctors tell him, you're probably going to lose one of your legs because, yeah, you're missing bone. And again, everything else was hurt too. But eventually he does somewhat sort of recovers. He's never as good as he once was, but he's as good as he'll ever be. And then after the recovery, most of the book is just little stories here and there about, people he touched or people he helped or people who, or seeing how he influences people. And that is the basic plot for 90 Minutes in Heaven. Which brings me to what I'm hoping to make a regular thing in my books, my reviews, because this is a new format. The good, the bad, and the why. The good will be the top 5 things that I liked about this book. The bad will be the top 5 things that bothered me about this book. And the why is just, 5, hopefully at least 5. I mean, I would love for there to be more than 5, but at least 5 things about this book that I finished, and it raised questions. It can be good or bad or just kind of like neutral. So yeah, let's get right into the good. So at number 5 in 90 Minutes at Heaven, the good parts was these 2 scenes. These 2 scenes, because the book itself is very dry. There's very little humor. There's some attempts at humor, but it doesn't really work. At least not for me. Some people might like it. I'm not a very religious person, and I don't know very many religious people. But for the most part, it was dry. But there was these 2 scenes that they did make me laugh out loud. And the first, I hope it was meant to be funny, was he was talking to his doctor, and back and forth, and finally his doctor told him, I've seen worse than you, but they're all dead. And the whole book had no humor for me up until this point. So when I saw that, I just laughed. I know it's a very generic line. I know you see stuff like that all over the place, but for a book with this kind of writing style, with this simple, very very dry, very straightforward writing style. Any little thing like that, and okay, how do I explain it? Go 8 hours without a drink of water. No, wait, don't really go 8 hours without a drink of water. Let's say you go 8 hours without a drink of water, and you have a drink of water, and the glass isn't really the cleanest, and it has a funny taste to it. It's stale. You can tell it's been sitting for somewhere for a long time, but you're thirsty, and it's summer, and you're pretty sure you're almost died throughout the day. And when you drink that water, it's the sweetest, tastiest thing that you ever, drank. That's how that part was for me, because it was so dry and so you had to push to get through it. That once I read that scene, I laughed out loud. The second part that I found funny was this. It had to do with a widow, and her husband died, and her second husband died, and so she was talking to the guy, and she said, I'm lucky because when I die, I'm gonna get to go to heaven and meet two people and have two husbands to join me arm in arm. And I laughed. This was like, I don't even think that part was meant to be funny in this book, but it made me laugh because it's like, okay, you die and then you go to heaven and you meet your first love, and then you meet your second love, and even if they just accept it and they're like, okay, that's fine, it's gonna be like, this is awkward. Like this is awkward. And the other thing that I thought was funny was just, I'm a pervert. Yeah, a lot of people think I look like a pervert, but I am in fact a pervert. So it's like a wife who's going to paradise, and she's going to be between two lovers. The idea in just like a golden heaven, it made me laugh. I'll be honest, I'm going to hell. If there's a hell, I'm going straight to hell. But I got a laugh out of it. So that was number 5. Okay, so the fourth best thing about this book was the accident and the recovery. Because those parts, when I read them, I actually paid attention to them. I actually, I sat down and I looked at it, and it didn't lose me as much as the rest of this book. Because I don't know if you guys have ever read about people recovering, but it sucks, and you can't help but feel bad for them. Like, okay, the accident was gruesome enough because of anytime you hear lost a bone, it's gonna stay with you. It's gonna stick to you. Almost, arm getting ripped off. Just all of it stuck with me. And so that was what he did best. When he described being trapped in the bed, and I couldn't live through anything like that. So I sympathized with the guy. I might not have enjoyed his book, but the idea of just lying in bed, because I'm don't look at my gut when I say this, but I'm a fairly active person. I walk my dogs every day. I'm on my feet every day. I can't sit still for a while. So the idea of not being able to move your arms and leg and just being stuck in that bed, it just really, even though the writing was somewhat simple, it did stay with me. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Number 3. And this surprised me, and I touches for Don Piper. That is his name, right? Yeah, Don Piper for doing this. Was hell was only mentioned twice in this book. I'll admit sometimes I went to autopilot, and when we get to the bad, you'll see why. But yeah, he only mentioned hell twice. Once was because this guy was worried that he was going to hell, and they're like, "No, you're fine. You know what? You don't worry about it. You're a good person. All that." And twice, it was just like a passing reference, just like, I know heaven and hell exist. And I know that doesn't sound like a plus, but a lot of times, things that have to do with heaven, it's always with hell, because hell is easier to imagine. People are naturally sadistic and violent, and hell, it plays to our nature, so it's easy to push through. It's easy to say, hey, this is, look at what happens if you don't. We associate things being good with punishment. It's kind of like the same way that anybody who was in prison is automatically a bad person, because good and bad is based on rewards and punishment. And for this guy to just mention, because heaven was pushed, it was shoved down your throat. I almost choked. I couldn't. If I had to deep throat, I would fail. But yeah, it was very surprisingly very positive, and he didn't try to scare people into believing into heaven. And kudos, that was, maybe that should have been number one. But anyways, yeah, good job with that. Stay positive. Number 2, the second best thing about this book was, anything to do with the medical. I know that's kind of like with one of the earlier ones, but it somehow was really, really interesting. And I don't mean this as, okay, he's suffering, or just how unimaginably terrible and uncomfortable it feels, but some of it was like, there's this thing called the Ikonov. It has a Russian sounding name to it, and it's this big metal bar type thing that he had put on his leg. I think they said it was like 30 pounds, and it's got a bunch of pins. And what this did, and this is amazing, this is the world we are living in, okay? What this did is it forced the bone in his leg to get longer. The one that was missing, it made, like, they turned this dial every day every so often. I think it was every 30 minutes or every hour or every so often, and they turned it. And he said it was excruciating. And they turned it. He was sleeping, he was awake, he was in the middle of a pee, every time. And there was also there was pins too, because it was like a wire setup that they had to clean very, very carefully. And they had to put alcohol or something into the wounds to make sure it didn't get infected. And you know what? I did not know about this. I did not know. Again, they were forcing bone to grow longer. The medical profession, what human beings can accomplish and invent and create, it's so amazing. And I admit, I could feel this guy's frustration in some parts, because he's going through all this pain, and this was a new procedure at the time. But nobody would give him nobody would even say, yeah, it's worth it, because it had never been done before. So they would just tell him, it's going to be a couple months, maybe a year, because they don't know. And those parts they pulled you. I don't want to say they pulled me in. I don't think, as much as I'm trying to look at the bright side right now, there wasn't any really part of this book that sucked me in. But these areas were the closest. These were the ones where it's like, okay, if the whole book was like this, I might enjoy it. Because struggling and pain and change is what makes a good book. Which brings us to number 1. What did this book do best? What was the highest point on this book? What did I like most? Well, I know some people would argue that this doesn't count and this isn't really fair, and there's probably a lot of better things on it, and maybe where I sit now, perhaps the whole fact that everything was so positive should be number 1. Maybe you guys would be more happy with the fact that if that were number 1. But honestly, this book is easy to read. Like, it's one of those books where you could sit down, and if you can focus and it's something that speaks to you, because it doesn't speak to me, and it's just because I'm very cynical, and I'm very logical, and I'm very critical, that I had to take a lot of breaks. But honestly, look, let me show you. Look at how they're not dense paragraphs. It's big writing. It's small paragraphs. It's easy to read. This is one of those books where if you're somebody that you want to read something interesting, and of course I'm talking about, like, if you're not a very religious person, something different, but you don't want to invest a whole lot of energy or effort into it, this book might be for you, because it's 157 very, very easy pages. I hate to say this, but if you need to do a book report, and the teacher doesn't really have any limits on the size, and she's very easygoing, but she wants something other than like Goosebumps or traditionally kids books, this might be for you because it's very easy, very simple, very small, very light. You could, if you put your mind into it and you put effort into it, you could finish this in like 2 hours, 3 hours tops. If you're really, you can focus. So yeah. So those were the 5 high points of this book. Now let's get to the 5 low points. And this is where I'm going to shine because I am an asshole and I like pointing out flaws. Okay, so the 5th wrong in this book, the 5th thing that bothered me about this book had to do with the accident. You're like, yes, I know I said I like the accident. I know I like the procedures and the recovery and his hardships for that. But there was one thing about the beginning of the book that just did not make sense. And it agitated me. So, in the beginning of the book, this preacher or a father or some form of religious head sees an accident and decides, I need to pray. He says God told him, you need to pray. But the point is, he had to pray. So, he gets out and he says, I have to pray for this man. And a police officer said yes. I mean, there was some back and forth, but a police officer who knows that there's a dead body inside a van or a car. No, Don Piper got a van later. Inside the car, said yes. He told this stranger, yes, go ahead and go into that car with a corpse and pray to him. That is fine. I have no problem with that. You can go ahead. No, a police officer should not allow a stranger to go into an area with a corpse. For all they know, there was foul play, there was evidence, there was 100 other things could have been wrong. But no, this officer let a man go in to the site of a fatal accident to pray. We got this book because that man went inside the car and prayed. Now, I'm not saying prayer brought the man back. But if there was not somebody in there when Don regained consciousness, we might not have had this book. So, number 5, a man got police permission to go into an area with a corpse, an active scene. God damn you. So that's the 5th worst thing about the book. But what's the number 4th worst thing? What's just slightly worse than, complete lack of police procedure that involved the survival of a man who wrote a terrible book, which I hated? Well, that's the fact that this book has literally, well, almost literally, they try to add some in. No drama. There's no drama. Everybody agrees with Don. Nobody's critical. With the exception of the accident and, the recovery, which were my favorite parts, there's hardly any problems. He admits, I lost my temper, or I had I was mad, or I met somebody who was frustrated. There is no drama in this book. Everybody agrees with him. Everybody's nice to him. Everybody's patient with him. It's all accepting, and everybody goes along with it, and it's basically one of those commercials where any commercial where somebody's like, everybody's doing it, join the crowd. And that's kind of what this whole book feels like, is everybody's accepting him, everybody's happy for him, everybody's worried about him, everybody's loving him. There's no problems. He doesn't meet anybody that just says, hey, you're full of shit, you never went to heaven. He never met somebody that says, well, I think you're lying. He never met somebody that says, I appreciate the help, but your words mean nothing to me. It never has any of that. It just shows him frustrated, and it's a candy land. It's there's no drama. I mean, there's hardly any drama. Well, maybe there's one. There's just one point where he gets kind of lectured. But for the most part, everybody accepts him, loves him, agrees with him. Nobody's critical. Nobody... Yeah, so that pissed me off. Because You need drama in a book. You need to have some kind of friction. You need to have people pushing against him. But you don't. And I don't know how anybody could find a book entertaining where there's no problems or backlash. And next we have the third worst thing about this book, which is kind of connected to the fourth worst thing about this book, and that is the fact that everybody just agitated me. Again, okay, so maybe it's not everybody, because there was one particular scene that really, really bugged me. And I know this is kind of, you might hear this and think, well, make up your mind. Do you want everybody to push against him, or do you want everybody to get along with him? But the one major scene, or one of the major scenes that I did not like, okay, so let's go back to this man's treatment. He was somebody who was very active. Apparently, he liked to give. He liked to do things for others, and he's stuck in bed. And he's nice. Like, nobody ever, he never said he was rude. I mean, at this point, it didn't say he was rude. Sometimes he kind of snapped at people, but he was quick to apologize. So again, no darkness there. No, Superman with little bits of evil sticking out or anything. No, he was a saint. But so okay, back to him in the bed, in pain, constant pain, immobile, and people are coming in and they're just sort of, because he even says he didn't want visitors. And they're like, can I get you anything? And he's like, no, thank you. And, look at his from his point of view. He doesn't want people to get him anything. He wants to just be left alone. Because, sometimes you're hurt and you're depressed and, you want some solitude. That's fine. Like, I can understand him completely. And I would have been the exact same way. I would have wanted to been left alone. And then this one preacher, I think everybody in this is a preacher. But he was like some kind of church leader. And he tells him, you need to fix up and straighten up your attitude. And I agree with Don Piper's reaction. He's like, what? He didn't tell him what, or he didn't give him an attitude. He's like, because he said he responded in how you respond to an 80-year-old man that you respect. And he's like, these people want to do things for you, and you're not letting them. You're depriving them. What the fudge? If you're sick and you're hurt and you're polite and you're seeing people and you're thanking them and you're even putting the effort to talk to them, why do you owe them anything? Why do you have to let them do things for you? I understand that they're not responsible, and he didn't blame them or say they're responsible, but he just wanted to be left alone. And this guy is lecturing him, saying you're taking away their ability to feel better about themselves. What the fuck? You know what? That shit pissed me off. Okay, it really did. I read that part, and as much issues as I had with that book, that part made me the angriest, because he should have been able to be, don't be mean to people, but he should have been able to just say, okay, thank you, come have a good day. That's it. But no, he got lectured because he didn't ask for things. Because you know what? If you don't want to be a bother, don't be a bother. If you don't want to push people or make people feel guilty or have people get you things, that's fine. Like, if you're recovering from something like what this man went through, you should be allowed to recover. You should be allowed to do what makes you feel better, or what will lead to you feeling better. So, and it's just it was just sort of the I don't know, like, I guess in organizations like that, it's kind of like you do things for the community, or everything's about the community, and I guess there's an evolutionary purpose for that. But it made me so angry that this guy who was hurting and who was being polite, I cannot bring that up enough. He was being polite, he was being nice, was getting lectured and talked down to because he has his pride. If you're in bed and you're immobile, let them keep your pride. Have your pride. Enjoy saying, you know what, I don't want to be a bother to people. And if you need help, I understand, maybe there's a balance, but he was letting them, take care of him in the hospital, so why not just let him have his pride? And, if anything, okay, so let him, they want to do things for them. Okay, he should have told them, let me just be by myself and rest. That's what he should have said. That's what he should have said. Once he got lectured, he should have told every single person who came in, okay, let me just relax. And this is another case where maybe I should have put this at number 1 because I'm getting mad just thinking about it. Just let the man relax and recover at his own... God damn it. So... Namaste. The light within me recognizes the light within you. I will be calm. I will not let the... I am calm. Okay, so... This is a recruitment tool. He doesn't try to push it as much, saying, oh, you should believe in God or you should have faith. But he's pushing it. It's pushing a lot because God is thanked so much in this book. He's thanked for bringing him back, even though he's not happy being back. It's thanked for his suffering. It's thanked for being given lesson. God is thanked for being given chances or him finding something. God is thanked a lot. Like, I know it doesn't say, hey, believe in God or you're gonna suffer to hell, or believe in God because it's good or anything, but it's close. It's like, you ever talk to somebody and almost every little thing they stop and say, God is good, or God was looking out for me, or God did this for me, or God did that, and yeah, I can't. I have problems being with those people, and it's not just because what they say is illogical. It's just it agitates me to see, oh, God is good, or I'm glad God was looking out for me so much, and part of me wonders, not to throw shade, but if maybe he wasn't thanking God so much because he didn't want to come off as a martyr, like somebody who was just, oh, I hate this responsibility, but it's my responsibility. Because there was a lot of times in the books where it felt like, okay, it sucks what happens to me, but I'm on a path. I'm being directed, or I'm here for a reason, or I'm special because God wanted me to do this. But I don't like a martyr, like somebody who they're suffering, but they're suffering for the divine purpose, or they're suffering for a reason, and that kind of writing, it just, some people might be okay with it. Like when Trump says, like Trump, he's like, oh, well, people are picking on me, but I'm just, any Republican, I rarely see Democrats, but any Republicans, like, oh, they're picking on us, or they're treating us bad, but we're doing God's will, or we're suffering for God's will. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of that. So if you have problems with stuff like that, you might not be a fan of this book. So those were the top 4 worst things about this book. But what's number 1? What about this book was just so low and which overshadowed every other issue or problem with this story? What about this book made it really, really tempting to burn? Just throw it in a fire and watch it burn. Not that I ever would. I don't believe in book burning. I have a huge library and live in constant fear of my house burning down, or the books get water just being thrown out of them, or finding a single book bug or something like that. So I would never destroy a book, ever. I don't care what it says. I would never destroy a book. That would be my issue, is that at the end of the world, I would be one of those people who's just trying to get as many books as possible, and that would be my goal, other than survival. And taking care of my dogs is just to make sure I have very many books. But what about this book right here got me the closest to burning it? Well, it's boring. It's very, very boring. It's written very, it's written very simple. It's written just, this is what happened. There's not a lot of metaphors or elegant language or similes, and he doesn't try to connect things, or there's not a lot of the plot is, like I said, the plot is he gets in an injury and he recovers, and then different stories at different points in the timeline, and sometimes you go back and forth, but The plot, you read it and you stop and you think, it's in these 3 sections, but I have no idea what else happened. I tried to read it at work. I was reading this at work on my break. I go to the area where there's a lot of shoes, and because they have those things to sit down because they took my bench away. And I sit there and I try to read, and I realize I can't read. So I started. I played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links because I couldn't focus, or I stopped and I watched old people or children try on shoes, and that was more entertainment than this book. This book, which I did say you could probably finish in 2-3 hours if you put your mind to it, took me 6 days. Keep in mind, there's been 400 or 500 page books that I finish in 1 day, depending on how good they are, and if I'm off. That 500 book, though, it was a good book. I was off, and I was just getting off from I broke up with a girlfriend, so I was looking for anything, and I just shot through it. I do plan on someday to do a review on that book, but that's neither here nor now. The point is, this book, which is 150 pages of super, simple paragraphs, of really, really just simple paragraphs, took me 6 days. And this wasn't the first time I tried reading this book. I don't know if you want to count all the other failed attempts at reading this book, but it's boring, and your mind goes numb from reading it. This is a boring book. So yeah, number 1 problem with this book is it is boring, and you will. Well, okay, maybe you don't get mad when you get bored, but it's boring. That's the worst thing. That is literally the worst thing any writer can do. Is it's boring. I would rather read something nonsensical, something completely batshit crazy. I would rather read something that was gruesome and hate-filled or just, stupid or childish, but not boring. That's my issue. Boring. So, yeah. Okay, so those were the negatives or the worst parts of 90 Minutes in Heaven. And then we went through the best parts in 90 Minutes of Heaven. In Heaven. But what are some of the questions that this book causes? Let's look at the whys that came out of reading this book, because I wanted to call this the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's not. The last part isn't so much ugly, because questions, they're beautiful in its own ways. Or the other thing I wanted to call it was the weird, but not all questions are weird. Not all the questions. You don't ask a question just because it doesn't make sense. So the why seems like the best thing to call this section. So let's look at the whys of this book. Let's look at the how comes, or the what was it that created these. So these are going to be my top 5 questions that came out of this book. And so the first question that I got from reading this book is, why does everybody just accept it? Is it because the people that he talked to are automatically Christians and they just want to believe everything he's saying? Or is he in an area where it's just less educated? But pretty much everybody at Show talking to this book, they just accepted it. They just said, okay, that's fine. I believe you. Or, I love this story. Or everybody that he showed in this book. And I know, I'm pretty sure that's not the case. I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't believe it. But there was still a lot of people. This is a bestseller. Okay, this is a bestseller. I forgot how many. This is a special edition version of it. But it's a bestseller. So people were getting into this idea. What was it? The book made a point of talking about this old woman that was terminal with, I think, cancer, and she was a hardcore atheist. And they just showed her a tape of this guy talking about heaven, and and then she's like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm a Christian now. I'm gonna go to heaven." That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Like, if I was dying, and there's some times where I think, okay, I'm gonna die, or everybody's had moments where they think they're gonna die, and I do. When you're in those moments, you do look at the various problems, but you don't just say, well, there's a God, or this guy really does believe that he saw God. Because there's a lot of people that honestly believe. Like, I know that Christianity and and Judaism and Islam and paganism, everything's corrupted by people who just take advantage of it. But there are people who really believe. But I've never, and I've in the atheists I talk to, they've never said, well, this person convinced me because he just really believes. And I think this was a really missed opportunity in 90 Minutes of Heaven, because you could have had him talk to philosophers or people trained in logic or people at schools, or people who would have made a real, to him convinced he would have made a real big statement, but you didn't. And I don't know. It's hard to believe that everybody believed. And yeah, there's a thing called a God helmet or heaven helmet. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but they took a football helmet and they put these like electrodes or these things that stimulate the brain in a certain area, and when they put it on people and they turned it on, it gave them out of body experiences. Didn't he talk to anybody who tried these helmets and had their own out of body experiences? It's weird that everybody accepted it. That's my point. It's you could have done so much more with that. You could have had him go against heavy hitters or maybe talk to people of other faiths or pagans or something. But it's just, all it is it just, why just have it as a commercial with everybody who's agreeing with you? Well, think of all the interesting things he could have done. How much did this all cost? Number 4 in terms of what I'm curious about is how much did this cost? I even looked it up in the book. I can't remember it ever mentioning money, but medical bills are expensive, and he had I think 10 or 20 different surgeries. And when I looked it up, I found one place that it said $6 million. How come he never talked about that? How come you don't? Why not say this is how much it costs, or this is the money, or I would like to know how they got to pay for it. Did the church pay for it? Did they make the money off him? Going to talk to places. What was the initial reaction to the family when they found out just how much it was to pay? Was there ever a point where he was like, you know what, I can't afford this. I love walking, but I don't want to put this kind of debt on my wife, or put I can't afford this. How come they never mentioned the money? And especially nowadays, maybe nowadays it wasn't that bad, but nowadays everybody having insurance is a big deal. So why didn't they ever talk about the money? Why didn't they ever say, hey, because I looked it up, because there was like $6 million. Why didn't he ever say, I can't afford $6 million, and I'm not suicidal, but maybe you should just let me go. I know that he had his faith in everything, and he wasn't suicidal, and he wasn't the kind of person. He didn't come out the kind of person who would just give up. But it could have really hit to feel him talk about that, about realizing just how much money him and his wife were going to have to pay, especially with 3 kids. So that to me is something else I would have loved to see more of in the book. Does anybody else read these and think, like, anybody else ever ask people what they feel like for heaven and just think that sounds horrible, just terrible? Oh my gosh, heaven sounds awful to me. Like the heaven in this book sounded terrible. He died and he met all the people who in his life who were Christians, or who pushed him towards Christianity, and it never said, oh well, I met this person who he was an atheist, but he donated a lot of time and money to people, and he helped people. No, it was just, yeah, these are Christianists. This book, that heaven always sounds like a cult when I hear people like, oh, when you go to heaven you're gonna see all the people who were other Christians. Like, why? That sounds terrible. Like, I've met a lot of Christians in my life, and I have one friend, and I do like talking to her, but the idea of just talking with everybody, spending eternity with everybody for eternity. And just who has the same mindset and beliefs as me. It's terrifying. I get bored talking to people over the same thing. Some people for an hour or two, and you're saying that in their heaven, they all he meets is other people like himself. That's bad. Like I mean, I don't care if they're healthy or if they're in their prime or whatever. I don't want to talk to people who are happy and just have the same thoughts, and the same beliefs for the rest of my life. That sounds bad. That doesn't sound appealing. And the other thing is, it was noisy in heaven. Like they said, they were singing everywhere, and everyone was hallelujah or something like that, and it's just all singing. So you don't. Can you imagine a life without quiet? Like, say you have your favorite CD in your CD player, and it's gonna be on all the time. Like it might not be in the forefront, or it might be somewhere in the background. But can you imagine an eternity where it's just this noise over and over and over, even if it's just all these blissful, perfect voices? No, that sounds horrifying to me. Number 2 is God. Well, not God in the sense that he's constant. They're trying to say, well, what's the God's will? But in heaven, he kind of experienced a little bit of God. He didn't, meet God full on or anything, but he experienced, like he said, that he couldn't miss anything. He couldn't remember the bad things. He couldn't, like his mind was blocked off. And okay, so I want you to remember that. You can't remember the bad things. You're going with like-minded people, like-minded individuals, and there's this one source that's in charge of everything. If you put that in a sci-fi setting or a horror setting, that's what a lot of people would call an overmind. And it's basically this hive-type entity which controls everybody by manipulating their psionics. That's horrifying. Like God in any other setting that's mentioned in this book is an alien hive mind, overmind, psychic controlling other people type situation. And that, to me, that sounds scary. But like apparently a lot of Christians are like, oh, when you go to heaven you can't remember anything bad. And it's like, well, that doesn't sound good. And the other problem with that is it goes back to the idea of good and evil. If we're here to suffer, to learn pain, so we appreciate heaven and the good things in life, then if you go to heaven and he just takes off all those bad memories and sensations, what's the point in all this suffering? What's the point of all these troubles that we go through if it's all just masked? So yeah, that was number 2. The one thing that stood out, and it didn't make me mad, and it wasn't a bad thing about the book, but it was all these miracles and all these fantastic things that were happening. This was medical science. Like I know that the guy who found him in the car prayed for him not to have internal injuries because science can't fix that, which it sounds iffy as shit, but all of these things, all of his recovery and everything, this was medical science. This was the advancements of people who invest their time and energy, or people who invest money into fixing the human body, into helping people recover. Now their ideas might not be the noblest, but ultimately it is the medical field which had all these advanced miracles. And I don't remember him ever saying, thank God for giving people the miracle of science and invention. I can't. That doesn't come to mind. It's just, it was all, well, God made it happen. But look at all these medical advancements. These are what made it happen. But why weren't these given higher precedence? And that was kind of like, why not? Why not say, oh, well, because I'm pretty sure he wanted people to say, well, God did it. And that's his beliefs. They're wrong, but, that's why he did it. But he could have spun it in. Why not say, hey, I'm glad God put the guy who created that wire thing that along the bolts. Why not say, thank God for this man. Thank God this man had such a brilliant mind. Thank God this man went to school and why not shower some real praise on the medical industry, which has its faults, especially in the U.S. But yeah, why not? Didn't anybody, and nobody in this book, I can't think of anybody in this book who called him out either. You didn't say, it was because of the hospital and all these other things that you survived. Yeah, sure. You could say, well, God brought you back, but if these medical options weren't here, you would have died. Like, you would have never even. It's not even a matter of you ever walking again. You would have died. You would have. There's no way you would have survived over a day or two without these medical achievements. So yeah, that was the biggest question I had. That was the number one question. So yeah, that was the good, the bad, and the why of 90 Minutes in Heaven. And ultimately, I will not be reading this book again. And to my friends and family and the people I'm close to who know I like to read books and ask me for recommendations, I would never recommend this book. It was boring. It was slow. I didn't like the writing style. I thought it was very simple. It didn't. And again, the worst thing about it was I was not entertained. So no, I would never recommend this book. Maybe there's better books in Christian fiction. I might, or true stories, whatever. I'll probably give it another shot depending on how this people react to this review. But I couldn't do it. If you like this book, you are. I don't know how you did it, but good job. More power to you for making it through. Especially if you could do it with 2 hours, 3 hours in one sitting. Fantastic. I'm proud of you because you did something that I could not do with a gun placed to my head. Well, maybe. I don't. You never know what you can do with a gun placed to your head. I might suddenly know every word of the Constitution if there was a gun placed to my head. Don't put a gun against my head, but I might. I'm just saying. So yeah, this was my review of 90 Minutes in Heaven, and I was not a fan, but that's just me. What did you guys think? Tell me, did you like it? Did you dislike it? What do you think of Don Piper's story? Did you think he really went to heaven? Do you think heaven doesn't exist? Are there better books or true stories or inspirational books that you would recommend that you think would have a bigger impact on getting people to see things a certain way? Share it in the comment section. I would love to read it. But yeah, this was Jimmy22 and signing out. And as always, thank you for watching. And if you like what you see, please comment, subscribe, share, and comment, subscribe, and share. Bye-bye.